Good Wednesday afternoon to you. Welcome to the John Sanchez Show on Newstalk 780 KOH. Pleasure to be with you this Wednesday, this hump day. And again, congratulations to all the first responders out there just busting their butts, getting everything good. And again, hope everybody's getting back in their homes. And again, our prayers are with those that have lost things. So it's a tough time here in Northern Nevada, but you know what? We're going to make it through. We always do. We always do. All right, got a great show lined up for you this afternoon. It is Wednesday. I always try to bring you an estate planning topic that you can learn about every Wednesday. So after I give you my stock market recap, after I cover what NVIDIA's earnings were after the close and how the stock is performing in the after-hour sessions, I've titled today's show, Should You Tell Your Kids What's in Your Estate Plan? You know, your children may someday inherit everything. Most likely they're going to be the ones, right? Inherit everything that you have spent a lifetime building. But should they know what's in your estate before you are gone? Well, today I'm going to talk about what your children should know, what you may want to keep a little bit private from them, and why the first family conversation about your estate shouldn't happen after the funeral, right? That is the last time. And please, as I will emphasize, you'll probably hear me say this more than once, I promise you that. Don't have the estate planning conversation sitting around the Thanksgiving table, the birthday table, the Christmas dinner table. That is not the place to do it. That's why we're going to formalize this process a bit for you and tell you how you can have this information with them. Speaking of estate planning, I want to give you a quick reminder. This evening at 6 p.m., I invite you to join me for my educational webinar titled The Estate Planning Checkup. That's right. So many people, so many of you have had estate plans written over the years. But how long has it been since someone has reviewed it? You know, gone back and make sure that it's the same as what you want, or it's the same today as how you wanted it years ago, which it probably isn't. Right? What I typically see is this. Number one, people coming in from another state. Number two, people, when they wrote their original estate plan, their children were minors. Now they're adults. Maybe they want those children to be successor trustees or agents on their power of attorney or their medical directive. If you want to say power of attorney, I mean on the financial side. Right? Life changes, as I say all the time. We're not today the same today as we were a year ago as a person or as a family, our assets, our liabilities, so on and so forth. But rarely do people ever blow the dust off that estate plan and say, you know what? Let me do a checkup, right? We get our physicals, our cars go in for oil changes, but we forget about really one of the most important things besides our health, and that is our estate plan. So this evening at 6 o'clock, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going through things that we need to check in our estate trust, our estate plan. Things like beneficiaries, powers of attorney, and how assets are titled, right? All of these for the estate plan checkup. Join me at 6 p.m., as I said, this evening. Just go to my website, specializedtrust.com, and right at the top, you can register. It's free. It's educational. We'll be together for about an hour. It'll be from 6 to 7 p.m. and a little Q&A session at the end. And then again, you'll put another notch in your belt as far as furthering your estate planning education. So I'll give you one more reminder before the show's over today. But in the meantime, let's get down to the stock market side of things today. You know, it was amazing to see really how lackluster this market was, because it was highly anticipating NVIDIA's earnings numbers. And boy, did NVIDIA deliver. We had a lot of activity on the calendar today, a lot of very, very important reports, but the market really didn't even budge on them. Let me run through them real quickly with you. 5:30 this morning, we had personal income. Showed an increase, this is July's number, showed an increase of 0.4% month over month. Personal spending, up a half of that, 0.2% month over month. And you know what's interesting with this personal income and personal spending that I've noticed? Over, I don't know what it's been, 6 months, 8 months, somewhere around there, probably less than a year. I've seen a switch, and I commend all of you for this switch. And that switch is this. As you just heard me say, personal income was double what personal spending. That's not the way it normally is. Usually personal spending is more, usually double, if not more, than the personal income. But I think, you know, for whatever the reason is, people are tightening their belts, people, again, facing inflationary pressures, so on and so forth, and they're cutting down on the spending. I think that's the bottom line. Like I said, thank the good Lord above that we have AI right now, because I think this market, this economy would be in the doldrums if we did not have AI sparking, you know, a lot of capital, a lot of investing interest. I really do. All right, so those were the first two reports, but then the granddaddy of them all, also released at 5:30, the personal consumption expenditure, better known as the PC. Now, this is the Fed's favorite measure of inflation. It looks at a lot of different things that the PPI and the CPI reports do not look at. Some are similar, but a lot of differences. And again, this is the one that the Fed wants to get down to about 2%. Well, they're about 1.7 away from obtaining that goal. Why? Year over year, PCE prices are up 3.7%. Month over month, we're up 0.2%. Strip out food and energy, get down to the core, also a 0.2% increase, and year over year up 3.3%. So no matter how you slice it, hot number, but not as bad as everybody thought. So the market didn't really have much of a negative reaction to it. Simultaneously, also at 5:30, we had the second read of the GDP. Remember, we get 3 reads. They're about 2 weeks apart for each quarter. So what I'm referring to here is the second quarter, second read. And the number was identical to the first read, which that rarely happens. And this is again for the second quarter, showing the economy growing at an annual rate of 1.5%. So nothing's huge. I would have thought that this number would have been a bit higher, of course, if you look at, again, capital spending in the AI space and so on and so forth. But that one has me a little worried. Didn't have anybody else really worried. But, I would really welcome somewhere around a 3% growth rate. But the flip side of that is strong economy. Fed's, of course, not going to hesitate to increase interest rates. So that's the good side of the economy, just kind of muddling along, as the old country saying goes. So those are the reports that came out today. And like I said, gave us somewhat of a lackluster session. We finished down 114 on the Dow, 0.21%. Our closing level was 53,463. The NASDAQ gave up just 21 points, closing at 26,130. And the S&P down 2 points to a close of 7,675. Just don't see that very often. To the commodity side of things, again, we got a little bit more action. Not so much on oil, though. It was another very quiet day on oil. A 4-cent loss, $82.25 a barrel. Gold, a little more action here. Fell $47.10, closing at $4,644.10 an ounce. And over to the bond market, we had a 3 basis point increase on the 10-year Treasury to a yield close of 4.6. But again, all eyes and ears were focused on what was going to happen around 1:30 when NVIDIA released the earnings numbers. And boy, did they do it. Let me tell you how the stock did in the regular session, what it's doing right now in the after hours. Then I'll get to the details of the report. In the regular session, NVIDIA lost $3.39, a 1.59% loss, closing at $209.66. After hours right now, the stock is up $8.69, 4.15% gain to $218. So here is what the company reported. Earnings per share, $2.22 a share. Estimates were $2.10. Revenue, $96.22 billion. Estimates $92.17 billion. It's been almost 4 years since the launch of OpenAI, ChatGPT, so on and so forth, but NVIDIA is still seeing massive growth. Revenue more than doubling in the latest quarter from $46.7 billion a year ago. So think about that. In 1 year to go from $46 billion to $92 billion in revenue. Their CFO, Colette Krause, on a conference call with analysts, said that NVIDIA expects fiscal 2028 revenue growth of 70%. Analysts were only looking for 44%. She said that customer forecasts point to our growth doubling next year, but she said guidance reflects supply constraints. Net income in the quarter more than doubled to $53.95 billion, or again, $2.22 a share, from $24.76 billion net income in the same quarter a year ago. So 24.7 to 53.9. Amazing. And that was $1.87 a share a year ago. But you know what's interesting? Does it not feel like NVIDIA is running out of steam just a little bit from an investor enthusiasm standpoint? I mean, we own this stock, of course. We've owned it for years. And you'd get so excited when these numbers came out because, again, they were similar like this. Revenue up 70%, 80%, phenomenal numbers. And we would get some huge pops in the stock on the day the earnings numbers were released. Again, we're up 4%. Okay, but we lost 1.5 today. So, let's net that out. We're, up 3 for the day, basically. So the other thing to keep in mind, how the stock's kind of fizzling just a bit, is if you look at the performance of the stock through yesterday, through today, through the close today, where again, it closed at 209.66, stock's only up 13% for the year. And again, it's if you look at some of the other areas of small caps, the Russell 2000 is up 21.1%. NASDAQ itself's up 12.4%. So it's pretty much tracking the NASDAQ. S&P's up 12.1% for the year, and the Dow's up 11.2%. So again, not that massive standout like it has been in years past. But bottom line is what NVIDIA tends to do after a strong earnings report like this, it tends to, again, they'll use the octopus theory, spread its tentacles throughout the rest of technology, and everybody gets real giddy. And I would not be surprised if we have a really good session tomorrow, at least on the NASDAQ side. Matter of fact, NASDAQ futures, they just started trading at 3, but they're up 271 points right now, 0.92% gain. S&P futures up a little over 0.5%, and Dow futures are up 208 or 0.39%. So I didn't even look at that before I gave you my octopus analogy. So just to let you know, I didn't cheat. But that's just typically what the stock does. That's why, again, it's probably the biggest barometer of what people look at right now to determine the health of the overall stock market. So great earnings report. Congratulations to any of you that own NVIDIA. Hopefully you'll see a little bit of a bump in your portfolio tomorrow. All right, you're now up to date. Like I said, not a lot of activity going on. Gave you the economic data, told you what NVIDIA is doing, told you what the market's doing. Let me tell you what we should be doing with our kids when it comes to your estate plan. I'll get right started on the topic when we come back. But first, welcome back to the John Sanchez Show on Newstalk 780 KOH. All right, going to get started here on our estate planning topic this afternoon. Should you tell your kids what's in your estate plan? But before we do, another quick recap of the market. Finished down 114 on the Dow. NASDAQ lost 21. The S&P lower by 2. NVIDIA, very strong earnings report. Right now, the stock's up $7.95 in after hours, 3.79% gain to $217.55 per share. All right, let me ask a question of you. All right, we're sitting across the kitchen table, and I look at you straight in the eye and I ask you this question. Do your children know what's in your estate plan? Not whether you have a trust. Do they know who you've put in charge? Do they know what happens when you're gone? Do they know where all of the critical documents are? Do they know who to call? And here's a real uncomfortable question. Do they know what they're going to inherit? Now, some of you are probably thinking, absolutely, I tell my kids everything. They know it all. But other group of you are going, it's none of their you-know-what business. It's my money. I mean, I hear this all of the time from clients. Put it this way. I hear more that it's none of their you-know-what business. It's my money. I hope to die with $1 left than I do. Yeah, absolutely. My kids are dialed. We talk about this all the time. They know if, I pass away or mom and I pass away, they go to this file cabinet, they contact this person, they do. I can't tell you the last time that I heard that. And I've sat back and I've analyzed this and I've thought about this a lot. I've been very, very forthcoming with my children because I know what happens. I've shared stories. I'm not going to do it today with you of clients that were closed-lipped. They didn't tell their kids anything for whatever the reason was. Privacy, fear that, the siblings may be fighting among each other because this child may get a little bit more, this child may get a little bit less. Whatever the reason was, they decided that it's best that they didn't say anything. But I took the opposite approach. I wanted my kids to know everything. And that's what I recommend to all of you. But yet again, there's some things that, as I'm going to share with you, that maybe I'll let you decide how you want to share it with them, if at all. Because, there are reasonable arguments on both sides. Some people will have children, whether it's stepchildren or flesh and blood children, that they don't trust knowing what they have. Now, if you notice, and I'm not going to ever mention in this afternoon's discussion to tell them a specific dollar amount. I can perfectly understand where you may not want to share a specific dollar amount. But in reality, does it hurt to say, hey, I've got an IRA over here. I got a taxable brokerage account over there. Here's where my trust documents are. Let's go over my medical wishes, so on and so forth. Because as I said on Monday, when I was, really heartbroken for our neighbors, being affected by the fires. And like I said, I was really having a hard time that day. I just felt so terrible not being able to do anything. A lot of those people, and commending all of you that were involved in that had a to-go bag, that had a plan to get out. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy going on right now about, having a hard time getting out of Somerset and some of the other neighborhoods and so on and so forth. That's obviously a whole nother discussion. But you individually, I've talked to a lot of you that, again, you were set. You were ready to go. You got great warnings from our first responders, and you did your part. You were packed, you were ready to go, and you went. So you were prepared for that. But use that same logic when it comes to your estate plan. Are you prepared for your passing? Is your family prepared for your passing? So now let's talk about, there is a difference between privacy and a difference between secrecy. Let's talk about privacy. My children do not need to know my exact net worth. It's none of their business. Okay, I can get that. And Lord knows the list of reasons could be a mile long. Like I said, it could be a situation where people just, parents are fearful again that their children are going to fight when they know the amount. I've seen it also where parents don't want their kids to know simply because they don't want them to be lazy, especially if they're going to inherit a lot of money. And I think this is a good time, folks. You're going to hear me do this topic a lot over the years, and I'll tell you why. Remember, it's no longer, on the stock market and the economy side, we still have the baby boom generation going on. But now on the estate planning side, we have even a greater phenomenon. It's called the Great Wealth Transfer. And here's what it says. $124 trillion. $124 trillion, according to Sorelli and Associates, and many others have backed this study up. $124 trillion is going to pass from my generation, the baby boom generation, down to our kids. Between now, it's just starting, literally just starting this year, between now and the year 2040. So, our generation has a lot of wealth due to hard work, blessings in the stock market, blessings in real estate, to pass on to our children and our grandchildren. So a lot of people go, you know what? My kids don't need to know I'm worth a couple $1 million or 5 million or 10 or maybe $500,000, whatever your number is. They just don't want the kids to know. And again, I perfectly understand that. That's not the purpose of this topic this afternoon. The purpose of this topic this afternoon is to share with them as much as you feel comfortable sharing with them without, again, going into the exact dollar amounts. You don't have to do that. And frankly, obviously your dollar amounts are going to change. Hopefully you're going to live many, many more years. So why tell them that you have $500,000 in a brokerage account when, 10 years from now, who knows what that's going to be worth? So that's the privacy side of things. Again, my children don't need to know exactly what my net worth is. Let's talk about the difference with secrecy. My successor trustee. So that's the person, again, that you've assigned. That's what I like to call the big dog. That's the person that's going to take care of your estate when you're gone, right? They're the ones that got the hard work ahead of them. So people say, my successor trustee doesn't know that they are my successor trustee. Oh my goodness. I cringe when I see this. Now, this person, again, as I've gone over many times, the successor trustee has to be a really unique individual, right? They've got to be pretty smart. They've got to be able to talk to other professionals. They've got to be organized. Maybe they live locally. Maybe they're out of town, but either way, they're going to be spending a lot of time in this position to wind down your estate, distribute assets, pay bills, pay taxes, sell real estate, sell business, whatever they have to do. But my successor trustee doesn't know that they're my successor trustee. Imagine for just a moment, because you want to be so secret about your estate plan, that let's say you named, let's say you named your oldest child, your son. Let's call him Jack. Jack, you named years ago when you wrote your trust, but you never told Jack, hey, you're going to be my successor trustee. And say your wife passes away and you're the last one to go. Jack's absolutely distraught. Of course, parents are now gone. And then Jack is notified by someone, it could be anybody, that you are the successor trustee. First of all, most people have no idea what a successor trustee is or does. But secondly, once he does learn what it is and what he's going to have to do, he may be cussing you out in your grave, saying, really, Dad, you left this mess to me? What did I do to you? Why are you doing this? And oh, by the way, you're not paying me for this, even though, again, our trusts allow you to compensate your successor trustee, which they should be. But you don't need to necessarily sit down with your kids and announce, hey, kids, Mom and I are worth, $3.75 million. But somebody should probably know. And that successor trustee, if it's one of your children, they probably should have a good idea. They don't need to know the exact amount, but they should at least know that you're not being secret and that you've nominated them. And most importantly, you have asked their permission, right? This is the other problem. You name somebody and they have no clue, like I said. Then, you die and now they find out. So at least ask, in this example, talk to your son, Jack, and say, Jack, we'd like for you to be our successor trustee. Here's the responsibilities. Here's what the job's going to entail. We are going to compensate you. Here's the pros. Here's the cons. Are you willing to do it? Sure, Mom and Dad, I'd love to do that. Or, you know what? Like I just had a client the other day. Great. Matter of fact, one of their children in the financial services business, perfect fit, responsible, it checked all the boxes. But the kid said, you know what, Dad? I can't do it. I'm too busy in my job. I don't want that. I can't do that responsibility. Cool. So then he passed it on to his next kid. So it happens. But there is a difference between privacy and secrecy. Now, when I come back, what should you be telling your kids about? The John Sanchez Show on Newstalk 780 KOH. Again, a very lackluster day in the market, but I think tomorrow may be just a little bit different. We finished down 114 on the Dow. NASDAQ lost 21. S&P down 2. Star of the day, though, NVIDIA after the close. Strong earnings and revenue. Amazing growth. Stock right now up $8.63 after hours. 4.12% rise to $218.29. Still watching the NASDAQ futures now knocking on the door of a 300-point gain. S&Ps are higher by 48, and the Dow futures right now up 266. All right, we're talking about your children, right? What a touchy subject. Should you tell your kids what's in your estate plan? All right, let me continue on. Should your children know how much they're inheriting? Well, here's the debate. Let's say mom and dad have, I don't know, $4 million, and they've got 3 kids. Now, in our estate plans, one of the questions we ask our clients is, do you want to distribute your assets evenly among your children, or do you want to customize the distribution? In other words, 10% to this child, 30% to that child, that type of thing. So again, mom and dad in this example, they've got $4 million, 3 children. Do you tell them, hey, we've got mom and dad, we've got $4 million? Well, here's the argument for not telling them. First of all, it's your money. It's not your kids' money. Secondly, this is a major issue, especially if you got a few bucks and your net worth is up there. A lot of times what we have seen happen is once children know they're going to be inheriting, and I'm talking life-changing money, millions of dollars, they start changing their life. Maybe they don't try to push for that promotion at work. Maybe they're okay, at the revenue level that their current business is at. Or if they're younger, maybe they don't want to go finish their college degree. Why should they? They know they're going to be getting millions of dollars. And especially if mom and dad are older or in poor health, they're thinking, this is going to happen sooner rather than later. So children, you need to emphasize to them, children should not plan their lives around their inheritance, right? If they get it, great. That's your dream. That's your wish. But if something changes, I'll explain in a moment where it absolutely can, and they don't get the inheritance they want, you want them to be responsible adults, living their lives responsibly. And again, without the assumption that they're going to be inheriting anything. Again, another argument for not telling your kids exactly what they're going to get. Circumstances can change. Obviously, asset values can change, right? Real estate goes up, stock market goes up, down, so on and so forth. Long-term care could consume substantial assets. If you do not have long-term care insurance, I've shared with you many times, I've seen multi-million-dollar estates wiped out because prolonged long-term care. Parents could change their estate plan. You may love your kid right now or kids right now, but you know what? That's the great thing about having a revocable, the key word, revocable living trust. You can change it at any time. You can change anything you want in that plan. If you love your 3 kids equally today, but a month from now, one of your kids develops a drug problem and you're like, you're not going to get a third of my money, you can change that. That's the great thing. It's completely flexible. Also, what I run across a lot, people are like, I love my kid, but he or she is not financially responsible. And that's where we get into, who's going to manage the kids' money. And this is where it gets touchy. I'll tell you this. I need to do a whole show on this because especially if we're talking adult children, which usually we are, we're not talking, minors. You're sitting there saying, hey, son, you're not responsible to manage, this inheritance. So therefore, and this is where we come in, we help them find a trust company, right? They will do all that. They will delve out the money based upon your wishes, etc. But your kid can't get their hands on a big chunk of money unless you want them to, right? It's up to you. But that's a great alternative. If you have a child that, maybe they're for whatever reason, you just don't feel they can handle an inheritance, look at hiring a trust company. Okay, so what's the argument for telling, in this example, your kids that you have $4 million? Well, for the responsible child, it allows them to prepare. Also, it can improve their financial literacy. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, guess what? Put yourself in your kid's position. Let's say you make the number simple. Let's say you got 4 kids, right? And you got $4 million. You're going to give $1 million to each kid. Okay. If you're a kid and you're going to be getting $1 million, if you're responsible, don't you think you'd want to step it up a little bit and listen to the John Sanchez Show every day and maybe attend a few of our webinars and read some things on the internet? And bottom line, try to improve your financial literacy so that you can be a great steward of your money when you do inherit it. Another reason to tell your kids, large inheritance may require planning. And boy, do they ever. So let me tell you a major problem that's going on. I told you at the beginning of the show, this thing called the Great Wealth Transfer, $124 trillion being passed from baby boomers down to their children over the next, till 2040 is what the numbers are showing. Here's where a problem or problems are beginning to unsurface or unsurface. How about surface? And it doesn't have to really anything to do with the taxable assets, which again, if you do things correctly, are covered in the trust. Where the problems lie are in the tax deferred accounts, the IRAs, the 401ks, 403bs, things like that. Now, why could that be a problem? Remember, when you have let's use the IRA, the same rules apply for the 401k, etc. When you have the 401k, you've named beneficiaries, or hopefully you have. We make sure that you do. Usually you're going to name your spouse as primary beneficiary, meaning you pass away, she gets the account or he gets the account. Then you name contingents, meaning when both of you are gone, here's who's going to get the money. Many times, clients want us to put in the trust the same percentages. In this example, if we have 3 kids, a third, a third, a third for the remainder of the estate. And then the same thing in the IRA, a third, a third, a third. No problem. You can do whatever you want to do. But remember, can't say I want that IRA, to go 2/3 to one child and break up the rest to another child, because that IRA application supersedes what we have in the trust. Just another little tidbit there. Now, so here's the problem. Remember, unless your trust has specific verbiage in there, you do not want to name your trust, your living trust, as a beneficiary, whether it's primary or contingent. I have this discussion probably 3 to 4 times a day, because the law states, or the rules state, that if you name a non-human being, like a trust, within 10 years of your death, and I'm not talking your spouse, I'm talking non-spouses, within 10 years of your death, your beneficiaries have to spend every penny of that IRA. You know what? Some of you have some big IRAs, multi-million-dollar IRAs. So let's make the number simple. Let's say you got a $3 million IRA. You got 3 kids. You're going to give them a third, a third, a third. So each kid's going to get $1 million. Well, the rule says they can postpone taking out anything until the 10th year after your death. But by that 10th year, on that anniversary of your death, every dollar has to be out. So let's say your kid was financially prudent. Let's say you died in 2026. So in 2036, that money's got to be out. But they didn't touch a penny. They let it grow. And maybe that million's now worth $2 million. Well, they were smart financially, letting it grow tax deferred. But now here comes the tax hit. Now they've got to take out a $2 million distribution. And guess what? That's 100% taxable income. Could throw them into obviously the highest tax bracket compared to where they were. It can create all kinds of tax challenges. And depending upon where they live, they could lose 30, 40, 50% of that money, depending upon state and obviously federal taxes, et cetera. So you have to do a significant amount of very specific planning when you are talking about large inheritances from a tax perspective. So I'll wrap up this portion saying, you know what? There's not one universal answer to say, hey, kids, here's our exact dollar amount that we have today. It's up to you. Some people, again, will say, my children don't know exactly how much until they're going to get it. And others say, my children have no idea what happens when I die. We don't like the last one. All right, we come back. I'm running out of time. Let's go to, should you tell them who gets what? That's another very touchy conversation. Welcome back to the John Sanchez Show on Newstalk 780 KOH. Once again, a recap of the market: 114 loss on the Dow, down 21 on the NASDAQ, 2-point decline on the S&P 500. NVIDIA, again, the star of the after-hour session, doing very, very well. Stock up $8.76, 4.18% to $218.43 after an extremely strong earnings report. And we did break the 300 mark on the NASDAQ futures, now up 315. S&P's up 50, and the Dow futures now knocking on 300 points, up 289. All right, let's get back to our topic again. Talking to your children. This is such an important area. Should you tell your kids what's in your estate plan? A couple more things I want to mention as I'm, as always, rapidly running out of time. But first, I want to, again, give you one more reminder about tonight's webinar. I've spent, the last half hour or so talking to you about how you communicate your estate plan to your family, right? It's a touchy area. There's no doubt about it. But before you explain your estate plan to your children, there's even a more basic question. Are you confident in the plan that you're going to be explaining? And does your plan still work the way you think that it does, the way you originally created it? Well, that's what we're covering at 6:00 tonight in my free webinar, the Estate Planning Checkup. We're going to look at your trust, beneficiary designations, power of attorney, how your assets are owned, and I'll show you how to determine whether all these pieces still work together the way you intended. Because before your family can understand your estate plan, you need to understand it yourself. Just go to specializedtrust.com and sign up. So again, that'll be from 6 to 7 p.m. this evening. Okay, now, a couple more important things I want to try to squeeze in here very quickly. Here we go. Should you tell them who gets what, meaning your children? Should you tell them who gets what? So again, let's use an example. 3 children, Equal thirds, really easy. But suppose out of your 3 children, you're not going to do an equal distribution. Child A is going to get 40%. Child B is going to get 40%. And child C is going to get 20%. Do you explain this to them while you're alive? Well, if you're intentionally doing something your children are likely to perceive as unequal, please consider whether explaining your reasoning during your lifetime would reduce future conflict. Because otherwise, mom dies, kids open up the trust. What the heck? I've seen this. What the? No, it's not heck. It's another word that starts with an H. What the heck? Now mom isn't here to explain. The siblings begin creating their own explanation. Mom loved you more. Yeah, but you manipulated dad. You already got money. You didn't help mom. And now we're heading towards family warfare. So remember, silence leaves a vacuum, and families have a remarkable ability to fill that vacuum in with assumptions that, again, you don't want. Because remember also, equal doesn't always mean fair, right? Again, with the 3 children, maybe you have one child, and this happens all the time. One child spent 10 years caring for mom. Another received $200,000 during mom's lifetime for the down payment on a house. The third joined the family business and helped build it. Should everybody still receive exactly 1/3? Maybe. But that's the great thing about a trust. You get to decide it now, not trying to manage from the grave. I look forward to seeing all of you at 6 p.m. this evening. Again, just go to specializedtrust.com. God bless. Have a great afternoon. See you tomorrow.